Okay. So also, if you have questions, I have my amazing colleague, Matthew Willems, who's going to be here. He's going to be monitoring the chats. So in the top right-hand corner, you have that chat button there. You can drop questions into there. You can also drop links. Anyone who joins the chat after the links have been shared cannot see them. So you may see some redundancy with people continuing to ask for materials. There's also going to be a question and answer document linked into the mini link that I'm going to put in the tiny URL that you're going to see on the next screen, where you can put in more involved questions that you might want an answer to, or that you would like to be durable for other people coming in here. And I just wanted to start by saying, I saw this quote by the Spencer Foundation the other day, and it really resonated. Just the idea that more drastic change to education systems has occurred in the last week than it has in arguably the last 50 years. And just to really give you guys kudos, I am so impressed at how educators have really come and been super excited to embrace this change, even though it's big and scary. And I appreciate you guys coming and being here at 8 o'clock to learn how to be the best you can for your kids. So putting that out there. Today, we're going to be looking at annotating online text. And just at the bottom right there is the tiny URLs. The materials here, if you go to tinyurl.com/DPS-annotating, the dash will be important. The capital letters are not. That should take you to the resource page for this session. Okay, so our objectives and agenda. By the end of our time today, you're going to be able to annotate a text using an online tool, using the example guide. You're going to feel confident about your next steps in using the strategy with your students. So there's 4 parts to this. The first part, we're actually going to look at an annotation guide for doing this online. The second is, what is annotation practice? The third, how to annotate using 4 different tools. And the last part is going to be a Q&A. It's so quiet, it's a little creepy. Okay, good. So hopefully we are all on board with this part so far. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully you are looking at the resources. So the first one, the bit.ly, is the district form to record your attendance. The second link is to that question and answers document. The third link is something that we're actually going to pull up during the session. It's an example annotation guide. There's a practice document. There's a slide deck that's really for your reference. And then finally, there's an evaluation for this session. At the bottom of the document, there's also some contact information that you can use after the fact. So just starting out, what is annotating? And I don't know how much experience you guys have, but really it's any action that allows you to interact with the text, to help you enhance understanding, your recall, to react to the text. And sometimes people like to call this close reading. So obviously, if you do this with your students already, you probably use highlighters or underlines or symbols or making margin notes. When we do this online, it's just going to be a little bit different. So online annotation relies on using different colored highlights and notes. So you can also include symbols. So I don't know if you know this, on the Chromebooks, it's really easy to insert emojis and symbols. If you were to go into the notes section of any of the annotation tools and right click, that first menu option that comes up is emoji and symbols. And then you can actually scroll down and search to find the one you want. So you can see in those frequently used, you can find the infinity symbol if you want to use that for connections. You can find the question mark if you want to use that. The check mark. You have all of those symbols that are available to you, or you can invite your students to use their own. So this is an example annotation guide. And again, this is linked into that resources page for you. And I know as teachers, you're already looking at this and thinking about ways to innovate and iterate and improve this. And that's great. But I want to take a quick minute to just talk to you a little bit about the rationale behind this. So every text tool has slightly different colors that are available to you. The three most common colors are the yellow, the pink, and the green. So nearly every tool has those three colors. So that's why that's what's used for the key concepts, the questions, and connections. The next most common color is purple or blue. And I decided that would be good for vocabulary because most of the tools that do not include this color have some kind of a dictionary that's built into the tool. So somebody is not on mute. If you go down to that button and click off your speaker, that would be awesome. If you hover down to the menu on the bottom, there we go, close.
Erin, you can mute them.
You can turn red with a line to mute yourself.
If not, you can mute them, Erin.
Yeah, in a minute I can. Just a second. I think it's good. Awesome. So that's really the rationale. On that example guide, it also shows you how to access those emojis and symbols on the Chromebook, and actually on my Mac, it's the exact same with the right-click menu. But if you have a Mac or a PC, you can also do it using the key commands that are on there. So we're going to do a little bit of practice. So we are going to use this paragraph about why annotate, and you guys are going to actually practice using this guide using Google Docs. So again, that practice text is available at the tinyurl.com/dps-annotating. And when you open it up, it's going to ask if you'd like to make a copy of that document, and you are going to say yes. The annotation guide is included in there. In order to annotate in Google Docs, there's two important tools that you're going to use. So the highlighter tool is this one that's kind of in the middle of the toolbar. You can see that you've got lots and lots of different colors that you can choose to use in Google Docs to highlight. Again, the four most important that we're going to be using are those yellow, pink, green, and purple. You'll also have the opportunity to use that comment box. So again, it's on sort of the middle, but towards the right, and you can add in comments. And I would encourage you to, while you're adding in the comments, to experiment a little bit with that, right-clicking and inserting a symbol or emoji and getting some practice with that. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to go through this and just experience what your students might be experiencing the first time that you ask them to do this.
Erin, we did have one interesting question, and that was, do they need to download and install Cami before they start highlighting in Google Docs?
Not in Google Docs. We're going to talk about Cami when we're talking about PDFs, and that's kind of a whole different kettle of fish. But for Google Docs, everything you need to annotate in there will be within the program itself. And I just wanted to open it up to any other questions. It looks like a few people were experimenting with getting their emojis and symbols. Was everyone able to do that successfully?
A couple people wanted a review on how to get to the emojis part.
Sure. So the emojis are going to be available on Chromebooks and to any device once you're in that comments section. So if you want to make a comment, or in other tools when you're annotating in the notes section, that's when you're going to right click. So right click, actually I can show you again on the thing. If you right click then in the notes section, then that's where the menu is going to come up, and the first option should be emoji and symbols. And then in the emojis and symbols, you'll be able to search, you'll be able to scroll. It's the same emoji and symbols menu that you have access to on your phone or anywhere else. So that's where you can start to get, I mean, it's nice as well because this is where you can put in accents on letters, or as I said, you can use the infinity symbol or the question mark or the check, and students can start to use that to kind of make their notes a little bit more accessible to themselves. If you are on a Mac or PC, there are key commands that will allow you to do this in other ways as well. But this works if you are in a lot of different applications. So you can always give it a try and see if you right click, if that emoji and symbols menu comes up. You could even do it in this Meet chat. You could practice it out. And instead of just putting a comment in the text chat, you could actually drop an emoji in. Ah, Therese has done it. So okay, we're gonna keep going with this. And if you have some trouble at the end, we can continue to troubleshoot, but we're going to crack on for the moment. And you can try it in a couple of the other programs at the end. All right. So now we're going to look at 4 different types of text to annotate. So 3 of these are available on the lion.dpsk12.org site, which is the library services. We're going to be looking at an ebook, an audiobook, a PDF, and a Gale database article. So if you have not been using Sora app for ebooks or audiobooks, or if you haven't done much with the DPS databases, there are some library services sessions on these tools. There's one today from 2 to 3, or there's one tomorrow from 11 to 12. And they're also recording those, but these resources are an amazing wealth of information that I think you're going to find really invaluable as you start doing more annotation over this remote learning period. So the first one, if you're annotating ebooks using the Sora app, there are basically 3 different functions that you will be able to do within that. So the first one is looking up terms or defining new words. The second is highlighting using yellow. I'm not sure why it says red. It is more of a pink or green. And the last is searching the text for occurrences of specific words or phrases within the text. So if you go into define, this is the process that it's showing you right now through the GIF. So the one thing that's a little bit tricky about Sora is if you take a look, there's a little hand, and you actually have to hold your hand down for a second or 2 before your menu is going to show up. And then you can select whichever process you'd like to be using. And if you are using define, you can see that the definition comes up with some information. So it's really nice because it'll do a definition for a word. Obviously, in this example, we are looking for information about a person who's referenced in the text. So it's a pretty sweet tool to be able to do that. But if you just highlight and click it once, you're not going to have that option come up. You really have to hold it for probably a good second, maybe a little bit more. The second part is annotating the text. So again, you're going to do the same thing. Highlight, you're going to press the menu. You have those 3 text colors. And in this notes section, this is where you could insert your emoji by right-clicking. So if you were to put right-click there, the emoji menu would be able to come up, and you could start to make a comment like, I have a question about this, by using the question mark, or this is a connection to my life using the infinity symbol, or making a note. So the third function on this is searching. So this is when you might see a character that's been referenced in the book or a term that's been referenced in the book, and you might want to look for it again. So in order to do this, you're going to highlight the word and you're going to look at search. So for this example, if we were to look up the incidence of hot Cheetos in the book, you can see in chapter 3, there were 3 different references to it. If we were to click on any of those references, it would take us back to the part of the book where it was referenced. So obviously hot Cheetos is just an example, but if you have a character that you think, wow, I don't remember who this is, you can pop it up. Or if you're like me and you're studying and you're thinking, wow, I read this, but I can't remember it, it's a great way to put in a key term and find all of the incidences that you find in the text about that particular term. So you can actually save a page in Sora app with your notes and annotations. So in order to do that, once you're in the app, you're going to be looking at the book and you're going to click on the title of the book. You're going to have this little menu in step 2 that shows up where you have the option to open the book, renew, return. The important one down here is the notes and highlights. If you click on that, you're going to see the little part in step 3. You can see that the notes are there. You can see there's 2 yellow highlighted notes. The quote is there. My notes are there. And I can choose which format I want to export it in. So I can export it as a PDF, CSV, text. I can copy it to clipboard or to Google Drive. If you'd like it to look pretty, you want to save it to Google Drive as a PDF. So one of the cool things about this is on that left-hand side, you can choose whether you want your notes page to have everything you put in there, only your notes, or you can isolate the color of highlights. So imagine you said, okay, I only want the evidence that I'm going to use for my writing. I'm only going to take my yellow highlights. You can isolate those and only have the page create those highlights. Again, once you select to save it to Google Drive, it's going to give you a format. I would choose PDF. The text format is really, really ugly. The PDF format, the example is on the right here. And I put a little unicorn up because as teachers, we always want the unicorn. We want the thing that does everything perfectly. And there is one problem with this in Sora app. If you take a look, instead of giving me the page number, it gives me the position in the book, which is not awesome if I'm trying to cite it. Library Services is going to talk to their reps. Sora app is pretty new and they're going to see if that's something that Sora app will fix at some point. But for the moment, the workaround I would suggest is when they are creating that sort of, I might use this as evidence type of note, I would suggest that they include the page numbers within that note itself. Good. Audiobooks can also be annotated in Sora app. It's a little bit more basic because there's no text to highlight. So it is really only involving having a notes part come up. So as you're listening to the book, you're going to look at that bookmark icon. If you press it, it's going to pause the audio text. You can type in right here the information. Again, this is where you could right click and add an emoji and symbol if you wanted to, and then you're going to save it. So the notes and annotations page is very, very similar. You click on the title, click on your notes and highlights, and you choose the format that you want it to export in. It's less pretty because all you have is the notes that you wrote in there, but it's still pretty cool that you have the capability to at least do that in an audiobook at all. So I just wanted to stop quickly and see if there are any questions that I can answer for you here.
Just a quick question about the page numbers in Sora and how they they're not fixed. They're kind of based on how big the text is.
Exactly. That's why it does it as a percentage, because if you were to change the text, Sora's got amazing accommodations. So you can change it to like a dyslexic font if that's easier for you to read, but that changes the spacing. So that's why it does it as a percentage. If you're actually in the app itself, you may have to change the view within the book. It may default to a percentage, and if you click on it, you can change it to page numbers, but that's why the percentage is the default.
Sorry, but if you're trying to put a page number in, or students are trying to put a page number in, and it's varied, and if some people, for example, are using a text, an actual hard text in a class versus using an electronic text, I just don't understand how students can successfully use page numbers then.
So the page numbers should adjust. If you opt to page numbers, it just gets a little bit awkward. So like you might have multiple pages with the same page number on it because they're trying to match it up to the text copy of the book. Does that make
Michelle,
sense?
hi, this is Matthew. I also want to recommend that it might be easier if you're using chapter references rather than pages, because the chapter that they're going to be working in is going to be fixed regardless of the format of the book. Sometimes hardback books and paperback books have different page numbers as well. So that's always a challenge to use page numbers, but chapter numbers are going to be pretty static.
So you would put, you know, quote unquote, you know, parentheses, chapter 10 or something. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's kind of the way I would try to do it myself. It may take a little longer for them to find it, especially if it's a 30-page chapter. That would be annoying, but that gets them there at least close.
Well, I appreciate that. And then my other question, I don't know if you saw it, was if they upload their annotations and they keep building them, or they have to renew a copy of the book because, you know, we're studying it for 6 weeks instead of 3 or whatever, do those annotations stay with their checkout, meaning, or do they just disappear and now they've lost all their work?
No, they should stay. So as you renew a book, your highlights and your information from the previous, as long as you're renewing it through the same system, all of your information should stay intact.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I've had that experience myself. We've had a book study, Zaretta Hammond's and so on, and I've had to check that book out about 6 times because it takes us so long to get through the book study, and each time my highlights are all still there.
But obviously when you export the page, that's a point in time. So it's not a dynamic document, the notes and annotations page, because as a PDF, it's not going to make those changes. So as you wanted to update that, you would have to do an additional export later on, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much.
Perfect. All right, so the next one is one that I think everybody's really curious about, and that's how you annotate PDFs. So this is where you will need the Cami extension. So if you've never used this, we're not going to talk about it right now. In that materials page on the tiny URL, there is a how-to presentation that will walk you through how to install the extension, how students will use it, and kind of the basics on that. So we're going to skip that for the sake of time, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what it looks like to annotate in Cami. So if you have a PDF, the first thing to do to open it in Cami is to right-click, select Open With, and then Annotate with Cami is going to be one of those first choices that you have. This is something that I do all the time for my own studies. This is an example of what it looks like when I have a full page of annotations. I have a whole color coding system, but you can see along the left, I have those tools. The free version includes everything that you can see that does not have that yellow lock next to it. So I have all the markup tools, the comment tools, the text tools, all of that is at my disposal. So a few details about those. So the markup tool is actually the highlighter. So you can see that within the highlighter, I can select the text. If it is an optical character recognition, then I can select word by word exactly what I want. If it is a scanned picture, for example, then I would have to use this second tool that's a section tool, and it's a little bit less precise. Kami has a whole color palette, so this is where students can be a little bit more sophisticated if they want to extend the annotations to include more colors. But the color that has the red circle around it is the default for your highlights. So if you wanted to say, I usually use yellow, you can change that to your default, and that's what your highlights are going to automatically be. Once you're in a highlight, though, you can actually change the color. So if I am highlighting this text, asking and answering questions, you can see that pink button is what the highlight defaults to. If I click on that, I can change it. So I could change that to a yellow, a green, a purple if I wanted to. Just next to it, there's 2 pages. If I click on it, it will show me a check mark. That means that it's copied to my clipboard and I can paste it. So if I have a quote from a text, I can just copy and paste it directly into my paper, for example. You can also add a comment using that little comment box, and it shows up in the margin just like it did on the Google Docs that we were practicing earlier. And it's also possible to delete it if you did it in error. If you wanted to make a more global comment, that's when you would select the comment box that's on the menu on the left. The global comments are going to show up with this little, the little dot, and then you've got an example of the comment box that's going to show up in the margin. By default, Kami is designed to be a collaborative tool. So I also dropped in a little shot of what it would look like if you had multiple students in your class collaborating on this and responding to each other's comments. So you can see it would be just like responding to each other in Google with the comment box. Somebody could drop in, or you as the teacher could drop in a question, and then students could be responding to that question in line. You can also use the text box to type into the document. So this is where if you had, God forbid, a worksheet that you wanted students to be completing, this is where they could do it. So this is where you could turn in your grammar, do now at the beginning, where you're just asking them to type in answers. You can see that in this example, the default color is red. I would click and it would allow me to type anywhere into that PDF. You can change the color of the text and you can change the size, but you cannot change the font on that. It's also possible to add drawings or shapes. So again, you can choose different colors for those drawings, for those shapes. And you can see, as long as you're really talented with your mouse, you can put in some lovely stars and hearts. And actually, you could put in a few words if you were a little more talented than I am with this. You can save your notes and annotations. This is not as graceful as the Sora app, but you can print a copy with your annotations, which basically would print it to a PDF unless students had access to a printer. Or if you use Google Classroom, it integrates really, really nicely with Kami. So if your students were to return a PDF that they had annotated with Kami into you for grading, this is what it would look like. So you can see if Zadie has highlighted these answers on her test, I can still see those highlights once I open it up within my Google Classroom grading window.
Hey, Erin, just a second.
Yep.
Before we switch off from Kami to the next slide, 2 questions. One, can students collaboratively work on a PDF to get the same PDF together? And second, how do they get Kami on their Chromebooks?
Yes. So the default is collaborative. So you actually sometimes have to train them to make a copy of the document if you do not want them to be collaborating. And within that notes section that's at the tiny URL, the tinyurl.com DPS-annotating, there is a how-to guide, and it's a slide deck. So that should be something that you can share with your students that will walk you through the process of getting the extension, and then the basics of just what we were talking about. How do you make a copy so that it's your own personal copy? How do you annotate just in a really, really basic way. So if that is not comprehensive enough for you, you can always reach out to me or your digital coach, and we can help walk you through those steps. But the guide is pretty straightforward. So I would suggest using that first and then reaching out if it is not sufficient for your needs.
Great. And then another question came up about Sora or Cami. So there's a little confusion there about what Sora is and what Cami is.
So Sora app is the library systems app for accessing ebooks and audiobooks. So this is where the library's electronic collection is all stored, and they have all of their books split out into collections. They also have a limited number of the core curriculum titles for each grade level. So if you were teaching Romeo and Juliet, they have a certain number of copies of the ebook and the audiobook that students can access. Cami is for any PDF document. So this is, I imagine you're not math teachers if you're annotating text, but if you were a math teacher and you thought, oh, I have this page and I want students to be working on story problems, it's a PDF, I want them to type their answers into it, they could do that. Or as an English teacher, you could say, I have this short story, I'm going to save it as a PDF so that my students can then annotate over it using Cami, for example. Does that make sense? If not, we'll come back at the end. We'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers. We've got one more section to do. So the last part is annotating a Gale database article. So again, Gale is one of the types of databases that is available through the library services Lion menu, and it is amazing. So one of the cool things about Gale database articles is as many students can access them as need to at any given time. So whereas the ebooks might have a limited number of copies, the Gale database articles you can push out to your students, and it's got a range of content as well. So as you are trying to access this, you're going to go to the lion.dpsk12.org site. It's going to give you the option to select your school. You're going to drop that down in that menu. And then there are several different databases depending on what grade level you teach. This example is from Gale in Context for high school. The nice thing about the Gale database articles is if you wanted to share this with your students, you would just copy that link and then you could share it out to Google Classroom or Schoology. And if you take a look at that example of the copy of the link, you can see that emoji and symbols menu comes up there too. So keep paying attention as you right click on things to see when that emoji and symbols menu shows up and when it doesn't. So again, within Gale, you can highlight, you can take notes, and you can define. So Gale within their program has the ability to define words. So if you click on it, the definition will come up. As you can see, they give you more rather than less. So if I'm looking for the word unfettered, I get not only unfettered, I get unfilial and all kinds of other words. So this can be a little bit more. Just make sure that your students are ready to be looking at the appropriate definition, just like we used to with old type of dictionaries, right? It also has 6 different highlight colors. So you can select the text and then you can choose from one of those 6 colors to highlight. And again, that's why we've got those main colors in there. The last part is the notes. And this is, again, the same style notes page that we had before. If you wanted to highlight and take notes, you can see in this note page, my highlight is green. I could then change the color here. And you can see in this example, it has that infinity symbol for the connection before the notes. After they take the notes, they have to make sure to save. A couple other things that I would point out, just because we're on this page, it does have a translation feature. Some of them are translated, especially the Spanish ones, are officially translated by humans. Others are translated by machine, so be careful with that. You can change the font size, but it also has that feature to listen. So that's really nice if you've got kids. I chose a science article here about tungsten just to sort of give you an example of what kind of articles and what kind of contents this could be applicable for. So again, you can save a page with your notes and annotations. And to do this, you would first select your highlights and notes in the top right-hand part of the page. And it's going to do a drop-down menu. And you can see that I've got some green highlights, some yellow highlights, a pink highlight in there. The second step is to click on View All Highlights and Notes. One of the cool things about Gale is I can actually create labels for my highlight legends. So in this case, I'm going to actually make it clear that my green is going to be for connections, my yellow is for key concepts, my pink is for questions. When I save that, I will then see that highlight legend, and I have the option to select my citation to come out using MLA 8 or APA style. It comes out with this sweet little notes page where you can see the highlight legends at the top. You've got the highlights and notes there and the little bibliography reference down at the bottom. If you send that to Google Drive, then you can actually have students attach that for Google Classroom or Schoology, and they could submit that from their Google Drive. So if you were to assign them, hey, I'd like you to annotate this text, they could send you that notes page. And the reason that I am so passionate about this is because it's an amazing way to get your students to make their thinking visible and to get them to start showing you what questions they have and what their understandings are and the quality of the evidence that they're selecting. So if you're looking for a way to really say, are they engaging in the readings that I'm asking them to do, this is a great way to actually be able to see how they're reacting to those. And that's just a few of the tools. There are lots and lots of other EdTech tools where you can use annotation. If you're a Pear Deck user, you can get the class to do an excerpt together using the drawing function. Newsella has its own annotation tools that are included in there. Obviously, you can use Google Docs. So what I'd like you to do is just take a minute to think about your next steps. So you can drop this into chat. This might be, you might want to explore the Kami guide and learn how to install the extension. You might want to get into the Gale databases and see. You might be like, wow, this is still a lot for me. I want to contact my digital coach for more information. Or, you're maybe like, this is going to be great for week 2. I'm going to take week 1 and experiment with it a little bit and get more comfortable with it before I push this out to my students. But I'm going to invite you to actually drop that next step down into the chat, and then I have the ability to follow up with you if there's something that you would like specifically from me. And while you're doing that, I will stay on and answer your questions if you'd like. But if you could also please let me know how you thought the session went. There is an evaluation that's available both within that resources page and at a different tiny URL. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to finish that for me, that would be amazing. And we will upload the recording of this to both our Educational Technology YouTube channel and also our remote learning website after it's finished.
Erin, do you have this session again at 9 o'clock?
No, it will repeat tomorrow afternoon, I think.
Okay, I'm just noticing several people joining the session now that it's over.
Yeah, let me see.
These sessions, since they are recorded, we will also be posting these on our remote learning.dpsk12.org website. And Aaron, you might want to stop your recording.
Awesome,
I think
thank
we're
you.
done. You're welcome.